Welcome back, guys. In this section, we are going to learn how we are going to troubleshoot the network and how we are going to diagnose what is the problem that has occurred in the network. To recap what we have learned in the last session, we have learned how to modify the world state database configuration, how we are going to configure ordering service, how to configure Hyperledger Fabric containers, how to define network configuration option, how to enable TLS, and also how to generate Genesis block, etc. In this section, we are going to look into troubleshooting the network, where we are going to see how the orderer locks and peer locks exist, and also we are going to look into certification authority locks and chain code locks as well. Coming to the first section, which is querying and analyzing the peer and orderer logs. So logging in the peer and orderer is provided by common or flogging package. So this package supports logging control based on its severity of the message, logging control based on the software logger generating the message, different pretty printing option based on the severity of the message. So all the logs are currently directed to STD error, which is standard error. That is why it is standard STD and ERR error. Global and logger level control of logging by severity is provided for both users and developers. And all these three options that I have explained in the last section or last slide is same. So as we told, there are different level and severities as we have seen in the last slide. So this is the logging specification that we can see. So the logging level of the peer and orderer commands are controlled by logging specification, which is set via an environment variable, that is fabric logging spec, which you can see from this slide, which I'm showing it right here. Fabric underscore logging underscore spec environment variable. So the full logging level specification looks something like this. So here logging severity levels are specified using the case sensitive string chosen from these. So this level, which you can see as a right hand side input, takes these value. It can be either fatal, panic, error, warning, info, or debug. So the logging format of the peer and orderer commands is controlled via fabric logging format, which is this environment variable, which is marked in the red. So this can be set to a format string. So to print the logs in a human readable console format, it can also be set to JSON output logs in the JSON format. So if you don't understand these environment setting and how you actually see when you are trying to debug the network, I'm going to show how it looks like, how the logs looks like in both orderer and peer in the lab section. Next is query and analyze certification authority logs. The Fabric Certification Authority provides three ways to configure settings of the Fabric CA server and Fabric CA client. So the precedence order is, first is it takes the first precedence goes to CLI flag, the next goes to environment variables, and the next goes to configuration file. Now let us look into what does that precedence mean. So if we have the following in the client configuration, as you can see here, you have a configuration file to enable TLS, but at this point of time, this is disabled. Now you have one field over here, which is cert file, and you are giving an input, which is cert.pem. So this is actually happening at a file level. Next, so the file level is the least preference level which we have seen. So if you want to override whatever is present in the file, then you will go for these environment variables which are shown here. So this is the command that you are going to execute, where you are going to override that particular environment variable, and the value that you are going to pass it as part of this command will override, and the value that is cert2.pm will be the value of the previous value, which is previous property, which is cert file, which we have shown here. So this file, this file's property cert file will get overridden by the value that we have provided in this environment variable. So if you want to override both environment variables and configuration file, then we can use the command line flag. So if you use this command line flag, which you can see here, so this command line flag will override both environment variable and also the configuration file, which we have seen in the previous slide. Next is all the properties in the Fabric CA server and client configuration file that specify file names support both relative and absolute path. Relative and absolute path are very commonly used in every programming language. So relative paths are relative to the config directory in case of Hyperledger Fabric, where the configuration file is located. Next is chain code logging. So who is responsible for seeing the chain code logs and why these chain code logs are very much necessary? So if a developer is developing a chain code on top of the network, then it is very much necessary to debug the logs that is generated by the chain code. So user provided chain code may technically also produce output on std out or std error, which is standard output or standard error. While naturally useful for dev mode, these channels are normally disabled on a production network to mitigate abuse from broken or malicious code. This means there is something called dev mode which comes into picture when chain code developer is developing a chain code. So when he is trying to test that chain code with the use of dev mode, you can easily test your chain code without bringing down your network again and again. So this is the use of dev mode, and this dev mode will help in order to develop the chain code faster. And this dev mode should never be checked in to your code repository or also to your production network. However, it is possible to enable this output even for peer managed container, which is net mode, on a peer-to-peer basis via this environment variable or property, which is core underscore VM underscore docker underscore attach std out, and you are going to set this property to true in the configuration. Next is, once it is enabled, each chain code will receive its own logging channel keyed by its own container ID. As we have seen that we are going to spin up the container using Docker for each of the peer. So that is what gives the container ID. If you want to learn more about Docker, please subscribe to other courses that are present in coding bootcamps. So any output written to either std out, which is standard output, or standard error will be integrated with the POS log on a per line basis. It is not recommended to enable for this production. So in the production, it is recommended to turn this off so that the other person or the third person will not get to know what is happening inside your system. The std out and std error not forwarded to peer container can be viewed from the chain code container using standard commands for your container platform. So these are the commands that can be used for you to see the logs that is generated by the chain code when we are trying to execute the chain code. So these commands I'm gonna explain it to you in detail when we are trying to bring up the network and instantiate and initiate the chain code. So that is it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we are going to look into how to configure the ACL, how to create end user identity, how to revoke an identity, and how to configure and start Hyperledger Fabric CA. That is it for this lecture. If you want to learn more about these topics, and if you want more attention and one-to-one guidance, please subscribe for our private tutoring for all these sessions. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next section.